As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study Exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Life is inherently risky, and there is only one big risk you should avoid at all costs, and that is the risk of doing nothing. With these words of Dennis Whitley, I welcome you all, our professional colleagues, student members, and friends of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, to another episode of ICAN-ngr, your great platform for learning, powered by our noble institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I'm your host for today, Tosin Akinwumi. Please inform your colleagues and friends that the show ICAN-ngr has commenced and that they can be part of this show on all ICAN social media handles, the Facebook page, Instagram handle, and also on ICAN YouTube channel. And today, Thursday, 22nd February 2024, we are considering another topic, the professional accountant as a risk manager. And I have here with me a distinguished professional, a vast risk analyst, an amiable speaker, and the managing director, CEO, Vicosbin Consult Limited, in person of Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA, that shall be providing insight into this topic. So sit back and relax as we bring forth to you today's episode in another dimension. Don't go away. I'll be right back.
The Executive Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria invites you to London for its 11th International Conference to be held at the Hilton Kensington Hotel from the 13th to the 16th of March, 2024. Themed: Cross-Border Integration for Economic Resilience, to be delivered by seasoned speakers who are subject matter experts with global renown. Conference will explore, amongst other topics, micro and macro factors necessitating cross-border integration, how international financial systems facilitates cross-border integration, artificial intelligence, and of course the role of the professional accountant. Conference highlights include special address by the 59th President of the Institute, plenary sessions, interactive sessions, and networking opportunities with UK domiciled professional bodies and professional colleagues from across the world. A guided visit of a famous London landmark and a visit to Westfield London White City, the largest shopping and leisure destination in Europe. Conference resident delegates get a VIP pass with exclusive access and offers up to 25% discount on high-end brands. Make your reservations now by sending an email to conference@ican-org.uk for more information. London awaits you. Plan, prepare, be there. ICAN UK Conference 2024.
Yes, you are welcome to ICAN-ngr, another episode today. And today we are looking at another contemporary topic, the professional accountant as a risk manager. And I have my amiable guest in the house today, Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA. Mr. Obinna, It is a pleasure having you on ICAN-ngr today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here too.
Thank you very much. And let me quickly take the brief profile of our guest on the show today, Mr. Obinna Okafor. He is the managing consultant and CEO of Vicosbin Consult Limited, a firm of compliance, risk management, audit, and investigation and strategy. Mr. Obinna is a fellow of ICAN, an associate of CITN, a member of Chartered Portfolio Management Institute of Nigeria, a member of the Chartered Institute of Security and Investment of UK, and a certified anti-money laundering special of USA. He holds both BSc in accounting and MBA in marketing, both from the University of Lagos, and a master's degree in accounting from the University of Education, Winneba in Ghana. He has over 20 years of working experience as an accountant, internal auditor, and chief compliance officer in the financial services sector, logistics, and other sectors before disengaging to set up Vicosbin Consult Limited in 2016. He holds certificate of completion of internal audit school from MIS Institute of UK. He is also a safety professional, having obtained level 3 health, safety, and environment certification. He has attended as well, facilitated in several self-development training locally and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the brief profile of our guest on the show today. And without much ado, let's quickly go into the business of the day. The professional accountant as a risk manager. I will start this way because, like I said in the quote, the risk that anybody can go through is the risk of doing nothing, just like Adele Woodley mentioned. So my question, very first question to you, sir, is that while calculated risk come with calculated rewards, effective risk management is also known as a key, because any risk that cannot be properly managed or handled is not worth taking. So let's kick off this way. In simple and professional terms, what is risk, and what are the kinds of professional risk that we have out there? Is there any kind of checklist for this risk that we have out there?
Okay, thank you very much. In the first instance, we'll talk about risk to mean, most of the time, to mean anything or events that are likely to affect an organization from achieving its set objectives. I also want to interject by saying that that is the most perception, most of the times, seeing risk from the negative side or point of view. But I can also say that there are also some good side of risk. Risk can come as an opportunity, depending on how it is managed. So basically, risk is anything that can affect organization from achieving its set objective. That's what risk simply is in a simple term. I'm talking about in terms of the kind of risk. Is that what you said?
Yes. What are the various risks that we have out there?
Okay, so several risks out there, depending on the nature of environment you find yourself. But generally, we have various risks that face organizations, face individuals, face nations. So we can talking from the reputational risk that has to do with the reason for which customer patronize you, the goodwill you've built, the reason something can tarnish the image of the professional or the organization is a reputational risk that makes somebody to begin to doubt you. We can also talk about liquidity risk, a risk that makes one unable to meet up obligations, financial obligation as and when due. We can also talk about regulatory or compliance risk, the likelihood of a new regulation coming in place, a new law that can affect the business you are doing or the profession you are practicing, or the likelihood of a breach in any of the existing regulation. We can also talk about operational risk that has to do with the internal processes, the management processes, the people, the process, the information management, on how things are done that can lead to loss or that can lead to a loss in the operation of an organization. We can also talk about credit risk that has to do with inability of counterparties to meet up with what the arrangement is in terms of credit. We can talk about also the market risk, which is a risk that has to do with the particular risk an organization is a phase for being in the industry you operate. There are several other risk subset of those risks within those particular risk state, but these are generally the general kind of risk that one can talk about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obinna. I think we are actually starting on a very right foot. I haven't defined what risk is and haven't just told us about the various kinds of risk that we have out there, from reputational risk to regulatory risk to credit risk to operational risk and compliance risk, and also telling us that we also have subsets of all those risks. Like I said, I must agree with you that we are starting on a very good foundation. My next question to you will now be that I will want you to take our global viewers through the roles of a professional risk manager. I haven't seen all these risks you have highlighted. Now, what are now the roles of a professional risk manager?
Now, we'll say that the role of a professional risk manager is basically the risk assessment, starting from the point of identification of those risks, and then assessing the risk to know the extent of the impact of the risk, trying to also analyze the risk, and then try to profile mitigating strategies or actions that can be taken to either reduce or prevent such risk, and then also try to monitor those risks and communicate appropriately as much as possible, then monitor the implementation of those risks. Those are basically what the role of the professional risk manager is, to start from trying to identify what the risks are, try to assess the risk, try to review and analyze the impact of such risk in the organization, then what are the steps that can be taken to mitigate or to reduce the impact of such risk. If you cannot completely eliminate those risks, but most times you cannot, but you can provide some intentional steps or actions that could reduce the impact of the likelihood of such happening, and then talk about also communicating appropriately those risks, and then monitor the implementation of whatever strategy that have been put in place. Those are basically what a risk manager is supposed to do.
Okay, I haven't known what a risk manager should do in terms of from identification, like you started, assessing, controlling, mitigating, and all of that. And today's topic is the professional accountant as a risk manager. Certainly, we are also talking about the roles of professional accountants that are risk managers. And that will take me to the next question. So, what should be the attributes of a risk manager? If you have now told us the roles, talking about identification and all that, what should be the attributes of a risk manager?
Key attribute of a risk manager is he or she must be proactive, because risk entails looking ahead, try to identify something before it happens. So he or she must be proactive to anticipate about something happening or about something going to happen. So that is key. Must be proactive, and also must be constantly learning. It must be somebody who try to understand what is happening around, try to understand the business you are into, the organization you work for, try to have a better understanding, and then continuously improving yourself. It must be one that is very hungry about knowledge as to what to do, what can be happening. He must be global to identify what is happening in other environment, other climate. He must be nosing around as to what the government is about to do. Some of those areas of risk I mentioned earlier. What are the things that are likely to happen there? He must be very much proactive to identify those things, or to be very much in tune as to what happened in his environment, and make sure that necessary steps are taken. So he must be a proactive person, must be someone who is knowledge driven, must be someone who is knowledgeable in the happenings of his environment, and must be able to communicate appropriately. That's basically what the quality of a risk manager should be.
Oh, thank you. Very wonderful. Thank you so much for that submission regarding what the attributes of a good risk manager should be. I understand that the very first one is proactiveness. You started by mentioning proactiveness, and you also talked about the fact that he or she must be knowledge driven, must seek knowledge, must learn and relearn, And the last one was that you mentioned is active or appropriate communication, which is key, which is very key and germane. My next question will be, and I want to now go specifically into today's topic, and that is what my next question will be, because we are talking today about the professional accountant as a risk manager, and not just a risk manager. We are considering a professional accountant to be the risk manager in this perspective. Now, due to its relevance, risk management is considered as a kind of specialization. And in that context, where and how does a professional accountant come in as a risk manager in this context?
Very fantastic. You know, by the nature of our training as professional accountants, we are trained in such a way to have knowledge of so many things, to be able to be the image makers to a large extent of an organization. Some people think that the image maker of organizations are those who are in the forefront there, the media people. Yes, they do that. But to a large extent, for anybody to take an organization seriously, it depends on the picture he or she, the accountants has painted about the organization. So in the course of doing that, the accountant does a lot of things that profile, that manage the risk of the organization. Some of the accounting concepts we do, some of the presentations we do, some of the principles we adopt in financial statement are actually risk management without our knowing it. For instance, when you talk about prudential concepts, you realize that you don't have to recognize income until they are earned. Right. And also, when you also talk about analyzing financial statement, which is also part of the role of the accountant, you discover that to take some key steps, especially maybe for investment or probably to deal with a particular customer, most organizations realize that the accountant have to analyze the financial statement of so many organizations to be able to ascertain the risking or the exposure the organization is face in such a thing. Whether you are to offer financial services like giving of credit or to deal with some organizations, categorizing them is part of risk management because you have identified the category of the organization you want to deal with, and that is the role of the accountant by having carried out a risk assessment, a financial statement analysis to identify the reposition of the organization. That is part of risk assessment to know where the organization can come in, whether or not the organization can deal with an organization. And most of the times also, even in preparing our budget, the accountant does not just gather figures together and put it together. He looks at several things that are happening to be able to know that this budget can it be realistic because of X, Y, Z, so the government coming in place. And also apart from that, in our regulatory compliance, the accountant plays a lot of role in trying to ensure that the regulatory risk is actually managed by ensuring that various timelines are kept as regarding some regulatory filings and all of that. So in those particular areas and most of those other ways, accountant plays a role of a risk manager, though without knowing it, but he's actually doing that because his eyes is on those things and ensure that they are done as I'm going to. And where organizations are going facing some challenges, the accountant prepares an analysis to draw the attention of executive management or the board that this is where our organization is headed, and this is what we should do to prevent or to mitigate or reduce the impact of that. So those are the areas that accountant actually manages the risk of the organization. Without having done that, the organization may see themselves in situations that will not be what they have envisaged. But accountant draw the attention to those things before it happens. So their job is not just to look at the historical side of the organization, but the futuristic likelihood of what the organization is to face. By so doing, he took clearly the role of a risk manager. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. One thing that you mentioned that also caught my attention is that you said many accountants play the role of a risk manager, though without knowing that even while they are carrying out their own duties in the office, are trying to ensure appropriate timely filing of returns, they are indirectly also playing the role of a risk manager, because if those returns are not filed on time, of course, there could be penalties and risk could crystallize. Thank you very much for that good response. But there is a follow-up question with that question. And my follow-up question is this, that in what ways can professional accountants render risk management services? Is he as an employee of an organization or as a consultant to an organization or as both? Please.
In fact, in both ways. From what I have analyzed now, as an employee of an organization, the accountant sees himself as ensuring that the assets of the organization is preserved, and also ensuring that liabilities are reduced as much as possible. And he plays that roles very well to ensuring that what should be done as and when due, except where he has limitation. A proper accountant would do those things to ensure that his organizations are not unduly exposed to some of those avoidable risks. So he can do that both as an employee and also as a consultant. When you consult for an organization, you look at what is happening around the organization, you advise them in proactive terms that this organization, yes, may be doing well now, or probably these are things that are likely to happen in your industry or in the field where are happening, or the nation as a whole, or even globally. You can provide those proactive advice by having access to what organization. So it can be both as an employee or as a consultant, maybe as an external service provider. So it can be in both ways.
Okay, that is clear enough that it can be in both ways, both as an employee and as a consultant to an organization. My next question would be on the concept of enterprise risk management. So it's not a new concept. Of course, it is a concept that wraps up in corporate governance. So enterprise risk management, I would like you to take us through the scope and the understanding of ERM, enterprise risk management process. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Okay, what you said?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, better. I can hear you now.
Okay, so let me take that question again. I can see you didn't get that question. So my next question is on enterprise risk management, ERM.
All right.
Can you hear
Yeah.
me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, so I said ERM is though not a new concept. However, we need to understand when we are speaking in the area of risk management, we cannot but also speak on enterprise risk management. So I will appreciate you taking us through the understanding of the scope of enterprise risk management process.
Okay, now let me try to see if I can paraphrase the definition of enterprise risk management according to COSO framework definition. It says that the enterprise risk management is a process effected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel, applied in the strategy setting, starting from that point, across the enterprise, designed to identify potential events that may affect the entity, and also to manage the risk within its risk appetite. And the essence is to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the entity's objective. So looking at the enterprise risk management, we'll look at the entire scope of it, starting from the board. It's a system whereby instead of managing risk in silos, whereby every section, every unit does its own, it is a combined effort starting from the board, like in a single portfolio, starting from the board, showing setting the tone, the executive management, and then all personnel in the organization in setting up their strategy. As you set up strategy, it comes alongside with its accompanying associated risks. And then across the organization, not just in some section of the organization, and then thus it will be designed to identify such potential events. It may not have happened, but there are potential events that may affect the entity, that may affect the organization from achieving its objective. They must have set up a risk appetite within which such risk could be absorbed in. And at the end of it, to provide reasonable assurance that yes, the entity's objectives is being achieved within its set risk appetite. So looking at the scope and the process of enterprise risk management, we are saying that it has to do with the setting of the strategies, which is across the organization, and identify what are the potential events that may likely affect the organization from achieving its objective, making sure that there have been a defined risk appetite within the system for which the organization should work within. So that is the scope I can interpret what enterprise risk management is. So in summary, in simple terms, it is risk management process that encompasses every spectrum, every section, every organization as an entity rather than having them in silos. That's what risk management is about.
Okay, thank you very much for that definition and the explanation regarding enterprise risk management. For those who are just joining us, this is your program, ICAN-ngr, and today we have here Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA, who is dissecting the topic, the professional accountant ask a risk manager. Send in your questions. Be free to send in your questions. Is right here to provide adequate responses to those questions. Moving on, as a professional accountant, I know we earlier talked about this part of this question in an earlier question I asked you, but there's still a question here that has a semblance of what I've earlier asked you. When you said, though chartered accountants perform risk management role even without knowing. So that's the basis, that's what is leading me to this question now. As a professional accountant and a risk management consultant, what could be the reason why professional accountants do not inherently see themselves as risk managers? What could be responsible for that?
One, I will simply say in simple words, knowledge gap. Knowledge gap in the sense that if we understand what risk management is about, you will inherently understand that some of the things we are doing is actually part of risk management. And of course, when you talk about risk management, actually, the real and effective risk management is by the process owners. So as an accountant, you have a part of the risk to manage within your system. So probably because you have not known the scope or probably the extent to which we do that, that I would simply say is because of ignorance. So what we need to do is just to identify ourselves and realize that we may not be an all-round risk managers, but in some areas we are. So we just have to have that knowledge base. I think that's what has happened is because the ignorant level, or probably, let me not use the word ignorant level, the knowledge gap is what have made us to feel that we are not, even though we are to a reasonable degree.
Okay. I think maybe after today's session, we'll have been able to fill that knowledge gap and possibly see ourselves in the right line. Let's take another question before we go on the commercial. We'll hear about risk management maturity model. Risk management maturity model. What is it about and how does it operate?
Well, fantastic. Risk management maturity model actually is defines or expresses or displays the extent to which an organization have implemented its risk management strategies or enterprise risk management. And we have like about 5 levels of risk management maturity. Sometimes some have it as 4, some have it 5. But maybe I will try to put up some position in that regard. Looking at some levels, we have the first level, which is the lowest level, that is referred to as the risk naive. In this regard, there's no formal risk approach to development of risk. Everybody is still in limbo, is in ignorance about what a risk management is. So organizations that are in that level, their risk maturity level is risk naive. They are not actually aware of what risk is about. The second level is risk aware, where there are scattered and silos risk management approaches. Everyone does his own, but it's not unified as a system of managing risk as an organization. We have the other level, which is risk defined. In that regard, there are strategies, there are policies in place, there are communication about risk, but the risk appetite also have been defined, but implementation is actually still not as it ought to be. But people understand what risk is. That is risk defined level. It was not talk about the risk managed. The risk managed here is where enterprise-wide approach have been adopted, developed, and communicated, and risk is being managed. Then the last and the best level is where risk have been embedded. In here, all internal control processes and internal operations, risk management have been embedded into the operation. So the risk maturity level shows the extent at which level an organization is at any point in time in terms of managing their risk as regards their level of understanding, their level of implementation, and their level of understanding what the risk management process is in the organization. So that's what the risk maturity level is talking about.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much, Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA. CEO of Vicosbin Consult Limited, for sharing your insight on the topic, the professional accountant as a risk manager. Let's quickly go on some commercials. Like we have usually been telling you, bring your wares, bring your products, bring your services. Let us market you, let's publish you, let's tell people about what you do on this show. I tell you, you can't regret partnering with us on this show, and it is affordable. Trust me, it is affordable. Let's quickly go on a few commercials. We'll be right back to continue on the program. Don't go away. We'll be back shortly.
The Executive Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria invites you to London for its 11th International Conference to be held at the Hilton Kensington Hotel from the 13th to the 16th of March, 2024. Themed: Cross-Border Integration for Economic Resilience, to be delivered by seasoned speakers who are subject matter experts with global renown. Conference will explore, amongst other topics, micro and macro factors necessitating cross-border integration, how international financial systems facilitates cross-border integration, artificial intelligence, and of course the role of the professional accountant. Conference highlights include special address by the 59th President of the Institute, plenary sessions, interactive sessions, and networking opportunities with UK domiciled professional bodies and professional colleagues from across the world, a guided visit of a famous London landmark, and a visit to Westfield London White City, the largest shopping and leisure destination in Europe. Conference resident delegates get a VIP pass with exclusive access and offers up to 25% discount on high-end brands. Make your reservations now by sending an email to conference@icon-ngr.uk for more information. London awaits you. Plan, prepare, be there. ICAN UK Conference 2024.
As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
If you are just joining us, I want to welcome you back to ICAN-ngr. Today's episode, and we have been discussing today with our guest on the show, Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA. And the topic for today is the professional accountant as a risk manager. Certainly the questions that have been coming to Mr. Obinna, he's been doing wonderfully with those questions, and I trust that our audience have been learning so much on this topic today. So let me quickly go to and acknowledge some of our audience who have joined us on the show today, because without them, we can actually not be here. If we have the anchor and the guest speaking to no other person, then the program will be boring. So it is those who are here to learn that we are actually servicing. So let me quickly acknowledge some of those who have joined us on the show today. I have here Saifullah Badamosi from Ibadan. Thank you for joining. Simon Edo Gabriel, Adiojo Bamidele Ebita, Oyetunji Muyiwa, live from Ibadan. Fola Shadi Fakorede from Baga, Lagos. Awel Lawrence, you are cited. Sonny Abdulkarim from all the way from Kano. Diman Joseph from Kano. Pete Ezugo from Delta State. Fatai Odetunde watching from UK. Oladipo Fashino. Ayorinde Tunde from Alta. Akombi Christiana from Ibadan. Oladosu Taufik Babajide from Cardiff in UK. Adetunji Adewale Sheriff. Olawoye Samson Ayoade from Ogbomoso. Adebowale Adedeji from Lagos. Eunice from Lagos. Oludare Oluwaseun. Raimi Oluwafemi from Abia State. That tells you that the reach of this program is global. People viewing us from across and even beyond the shores of Nigeria. I want to say thank you for being part of the show and continue to tell others about the essence of this program, ICAN-ngr. That basically it is meant for you to learn and unlearn. And of course, we'll keep giving you goodies on this program by bringing in capable guests that can actually do justice to our topic. Send in your questions, and our guest on the show, Mr. Obinna Okafor, is right here to provide adequate responses to them. Mr. Obinna, you are welcome to the second part of the show.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along with the questions. Are there limits to the level or type of risk that a professional accountant can manage? If yes, why? If no, why?
Well, I will say yes. I will also say no. I will say yes in the sense that you are limited by what you know. If we are able to expose ourselves to a reasonable point into many areas for which beyond what we already know, then I would say there may not be limit. But yes, I would say no in the sense that is the no side. If we're able to develop ourselves, expose ourselves more and more, trying to know more, then there will not be limit. But then on the other hand, yes, is that you cannot be everywhere. There are some field that you just need specialization to be able to understand what happens in that particular area. So in that regard, there is a limit to which you can know. But the ones you know, I think the best thing is to make sure you judiciously use it and improve on what you are and constantly add, because the concept of risk management is an everyday life and it's something that will continue to happen till the kingdom comes. So it's not something you can deliver, you can't know it all. So it is a continuous learning practice that will help you to broaden your spectrum, but you can't claim to have known everything about risk management because you can't know so many areas, so many other fields, and so many industries that happen. For instance, I'm not like a comrade Bala, who is an expert in oil and gas. So so many risks within that spectrum, which I will not know, and he knows better. So if I'm not in that field, I will not be able to do that. And so many other industries like that that are having some peculiar risks. So that to that extent, I will say there are limits. But to the general sense of it, there are things you can always know. So that those are the way I would answer the question.
Thank you very much. I think that's excellent and that's quite meaningful. Thank you very much. And one word or one line that you mentioned that also caught my attention is you are limited by what you know, and that's absolute truism. One is indeed limited by what he or she knows. Then that's code none again. When talking about risk management or when we're analyzing risk management and organizational strategies, what are the key variables to be considered or look out for when we are analyzing risk management and organizational strategies?
Okay, trying to analyze risk and organizational strategies, you look at probably to identify the risk by setting up the context. Okay, then try to if I get to right, set the context, try to identify what the risks are, try to evaluate the risk by assessing the risk, try to evaluate the risk, and then the risk treatment. Within the setting up the context, in terms of that, try to find out what are the objectives of the organization, what are the context and the control in place. The context, understand the objective, understand the stakeholders involved, understand the criteria, and define key risk elements. Then looking at also the risk identification, what are the processes and the things you must do there, define what the risk is at that stage, then looking out for which are the risks you're looking for, what can be done, what can happen, or what has happened, how did it happen, how can we do it to avoid a repeat of it, and to do how do you do that to narrow it? Then the next level of risk assessment, the risk assessment have two prongs. The first of all will be the analysis of that risk, and the second part of it will be the evaluation of that risk. In the analysis of that risk, look at what are the controls in place, assuming this has happened. Yes, this may happen or this has happened, but if this happened, do we have a control in place that can mitigate it and reduce it from the inherent risk to the residual risk? Because the inherent risk are the risk that comes alongside with an event. But if, for instance, you put a mitigating strategy in place, for instance, as we have volatile foreign exchange now as it's happening, a control in place, if you have put a hedging system in place, you will not be affected. So you can realize that you will reduce the inherent risk of your foreign transaction by putting a hedge, which is a control in place that can reduce the impact of it. So in trying to analyze that, look at the control in place, how significant are those risks to your operations? What are the subjective or the consensus areas of those risks? What are the likelihood of those risks happening? What are the consequences of it happening? And what levels of risk can be exposed in that regard? Looking at the other risk assessment part or segment, which is the evaluation of this risk, evaluate the risk in terms of the severity and the frequency of it. There are some risks that are not frequent, but each time it happens, severity is high. For instance, plane crash. Plane crash does not happen every time, but each time it happens, the consequences are always very fatal. But there are also some risks that are frequent, but if you measure the severity of it, it will be so low. So those are the kind of things that will help you to evaluate the impact. Then that will help you to rank the kind of risk that you have analyzed, the frequency and the severity. The risk you have analyzed will not help you to know whether it is a very high risk, medium, or low risk. Then when you have done the ranking, you now talk about the risk treatment. What are the best option? Identify the best option to go for. Select preferred option. Some of those best options could be avoid the risk. It could also be try to transfer the risk. It could be to reduce the risk by trying to share part of the risk, or probably trying to completely accept the risk. So those are various options. When you have done the analysis and the ranking, you identify the various options, select which other one is the preferred option, then do the proper response, and then develop risk treatment plan and go ahead implementing it. Then having done that, you now talk about the monitoring side. The communication side also goes alongside with it. Those are the various things you have to do in terms of risk management processes, and that is what that comes to be.
Thank you very much, sir, for that explicit response. You will agree with me that our discussion today on risk management will not be succinct or total if we actually do not also talk about or link it to the prevailing economic challenge we have in the country. And that will take me to my next question. So considering the current state of the Nigerian economy, some opinion holders believe that the removal of fuel subsidy and the floating of the naira were cases of bad risk assessment have been issued. What is your personal opinion on this, sir?
Well, my personal opinion, for me, from the onset, I believe that the subsidy system was actually fraughted with fraudulent practices, and also believe that the same thing with forex system were all. But the approach in which it was implemented, to me, I don't think it would have been the best the best way it was handled. So what I would say is that the approach in the implementation is where I fought. But as to whether it should be what should be done, I think it should have been what should be done. But the implementation, the timing, before you implement some policies and strategies, there should be a period to carry people along, educate people of the implication and why you want to achieve that, provide some level of palliative and succor, and also provide some level of trust. Let the system trust and believe that you are about to do what you are doing. And that would have been, assuming that those steps were taken. If there is any sabotage going on, like it's been touted as some sabotage going on, the people will be the one that will fight the sabotage. But in this case, if there's a sabotage that's being claimed, there's now use the people to fight the policy. The policy would have been a good one if it is implemented appropriately. But because of the method of implementation, I think that is what happened. Now, it's also why I accepted it to be a good one, because of the practice. Normally, subsidies should not be a crime. Everywhere in the world, organizations subsidize some critical items, some critical goods to the organization, to the nation. Some organizations, some countries, it should be food. Some country it could be energy. Some country it could be transport system. Just to look at how critical it is to generate all the people. But because of the fraudulent system in our own system, whereby it has been difficult, I don't know if I will blame the government in terms of the political way to do that or not. Instead of going after the criminals, the public is one that suffer it. So by trying to cut off the neck of the child, throwing the bat away with the baby away with the bath water. Ordinarily, subsidies should be something that will remain in critical areas and managed properly by the government. But because of how it has been hijacked by criminals, I use the word criminals, unpatriotic Nigerians, and then the government feel that that's the best option to remove it. Now, but the removing it, which I agree to an extent, the method of removal was not right. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, thank you very much for your opinion shared on the subsidy removal and the floating of Naira. Let's quickly go to the audience table and pick some questions. Our audience, we have called on them to send in questions, and we have questions from them. Let's quickly go and pick some questions from our audience. Let me start with Fanny Mail. Okay. Fagbolate Mitope Adeniyi. Averting the risk and managing the risk, which one of the two is the best approach to the professional accountants? Averting the risk and managing the risk, which of the two is the best approach to the professional accountant?
Averting the risk and managing the risk. Well, there are some risks you cannot avert. You just have to be that you have to manage it. There are some things that are not within your control. They just come to you. For instance, if there are government policies that XYZ should be done, you can't run away from that, and that becomes something that affects you. And if there are some systemic something, so when you analyze your SWOT analysis, when you do your SWOT analysis, you have the internal thing that has to be your strengths and your weaknesses. You have the external part that has to do with your opportunities and what do you call it now? The threats. Looking at the threat. So the ones you can only effectively control are the ones that are within your control. The ones that you cannot control, you manage. So what are the things you have to put? So both ways are significant and relevant depending on the circumstance you find yourself. If there are situations you can control, you can avert or avoid. But again, I don't know whether you're talking about avoiding or averting. If you talk about averting, it's actually taking about proactive step. Maybe that's what the person meant. To avert a risk means taking proactive step to prevent something from happening rather than waiting until that thing happens, you start managing. Maybe that could be the aspect he's looking at it. Now, and that's basically what risk management is about. And that also come to in line with what I've said. Now, there are some risks you cannot avert, but you can anticipate it and make provision for it. And like I explained earlier on, you talk about inherent risks that can come alongside with an event. But if you have a control in place that can reduce such, and that brings it to a residual risk, that the impact of it may not be as high as it would have been without such control in place. So in summary, to the question, the person averting a risk and managing the risk, which one is better? If you can avert the risk, that would be a better option. But where you cannot, then the best thing is to manage those risks, because as long as we are here until we get to heaven, we'll keep facing things that have to be threatening us, and you have to just find a way to manage them.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. Another question coming from Fanny Miriam. So with the current FX issue, how can an organization who source for fund internationally manage its risk? I'm sure they are talking about the volatility of the exchange risk now. So how can that happen?
Well, even the international communities have provide such fund. Also, themselves will be confused on how to do it based on the volatility at this time. But one of the best options for forex management is hedging. But at the volatile stage at which you are now, I wouldn't know whether any organization accept that in a hurry. Hedging of what you have the future contracts. If you can have an arrangement whereby you pay for transaction in advance and agree on a particular rate, whether there's a change either up or down in such a future contract or a hedging arrangement. Those are the major key areas you can use to to manage the volatility of foreign exchange issues. Future contract means you enter into an arrangement that will happen in future to come. You pay for it now. You agree on the term for it now. No matter whatever happens, does not. The hedging also goes in that direction.
All right. Future contract hedging. These are means of mitigating exchange rate volatility. Thank you very much. Another question from, can we take another question from Raymond? Raymond Umbuakan and Shoson Lusoji. We have questions from them. Okay, Raymond Umbuakan. So what are the procedures for carrying out a risk assessment compliance report or GRC report? What are the procedures for carrying out a risk assessment compliance report or GRC report?
Pardon me?
What are the procedures for carrying out a risk assessment compliance report? That's a question coming from Raymond Hakan.
Okay, GRC reports. G has to talk about governance, R talk about risk management, and C talks about control or compliance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what is the procedure for carrying out a report? Is that what it's asking?
Yes. What are the procedures for carrying out the report? Yes, the procedures.
Okay. Well, I think I may not be able to give you a specific template as to what to be contained. Now, the report on GRC basically goes to the board, which is the recipient of that report, talking about the governance system of the organization, how the board have performed in terms of the committees and all of that. Then the risk management system. I guess this report is coming from the internal auditor because he has to be the report that he prepared about the performance, because the function of internal auditor is basically like in threefold or four: the advisory role, which he provides in terms of providing recommendation, then the assurance role, which he provides providing assurance to the organization, to the board and the management that the internal control system is working as expected, the processes put in place are being carried out as prepared, and the fourth side, the consulting side, which is recommendation as to what should be done, or sometimes, so not the recommendation, carrying out, involving in educating the people, maybe like consulting a training or carrying out improving the knowledge of the people. That is the basic three function of the internal auditor. Now, one of the way to communicate those observations is when you have carried out a complete review of the governance system, the risk management system, and as well as the compliance or control system, you provide, depending, organizations have their formats. So you have to find out what format have been provided, if there is any. If there is none, the key general accepted format will be to define, have a column that specifies the observations you made, and that column that talk about the implication of the observations, and then the recommendation column. Probably you may add another column that has to do with risk, the risk rating of those particular observations. Now, what I recommended most of the times is on the recommendation column, you can modify it to call it agreed action, because when it is recommendation, it will be sometimes can elicit a disagreement between the client or the T and you that did the review. But when once you have agreed, two of you have reviewed the process and you have agreed that yes, this is what should be done. So it is easier. You have a timeline where those implementations can be done. So a proper reporting to have the observation column, implication column, the agreed course of action, or to sometimes the recommendation, then put the risk assessment of that observation, and then put a timeline when those should be implemented. Then that should be accepted by any organization.
All right, all right. As we custom, because we do not have much time again, we have heard a lot about risk-based audit. Risk-based audit. In 30 seconds, can you take us through the understanding of the concept risk-based audit?
Risk-based audit has to do with a concept whereby instead of pursuing everything, you look at areas that have more risk exposure. That is why looking at our organization now, coming from the point of enterprise management, you now assess the various risk exposures to the organization. You look at areas that the organization are more exposed than others and pay more attention to it. So when you now focus, when you prepare your audit plan based on the riskiness of various process or operations, that is a risk-based approach. Instead of saying that I must go around the entire process despite limited resources you have, despite limited personnel you have, despite everything. So you now focus more on the areas that have higher risk than others. If you carry out a risk assessment, there are some areas that have high risk, medium or low risk. You can't be doing something that have low risk when you have areas that have high risk. So in trying to carry out a risk assessment, risk-based audit, you are looking at focusing actually on the area of higher risk more than the areas of low. It's not as if you're going to ignore the low risk areas. You will still do it, but more attention and more resources will be deployed into areas of high risk.
Okay, and finally, because of our time, in closing, ICAN is always open to ideas that would positively advance the growth of our members, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment. What is your suggestion on filling knowledge gaps and further upskilling ICAN members on risk management?
Well, I will say, starting from our certification exam, probably enterprise risk management or risk management should be one of the courses that professional accountants should be prepared on as a topic, as a subject. Number two, probably looking at also faculties. We can also create a faculty in that regard, whereby just to get members more exposed to knowledge and all of that. Those are the two areas I think the institute can do that. And if needs be, I think I volunteer to provide such a guideline if it is needed.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA, the managing consultant and CEO, Vicosbin Consult Limited, for coming on the show today and for agreeing to share your wealth of experience with our members and the friends of the Institute. It's been a wonderful time with you on the show today. We say thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Please let me make a little correction. The name is Vicosbin, not Vicosbin. I know a lot of people make a lot of themselves. Vicosbin Consult.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Okay. And we hope that when next we call upon you, you will hack into our call.
With all pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. And now, quickly, let me take some announcements on today's program. The Young Accountant Development Committee webinar is coming up on Tuesday, February 27, 2024. The topic is the role of young accountants in driving economic progress and navigating the challenges of remote work. The time is 10 a.m. Because, as expected, there is a 2 credit hours of MCPD for all those who would be part of that program. Don't forget, the next in line MCPD training program comes up on Wednesday, February 28th to Thursday, February 29th on consultancy. It is a virtual program and the fee is 20,000 naira. If you're interested, go ahead and register now. March 2024 ATWA examination date has been fixed for Tuesday, March 26 to March 27, 2024. Registration is ongoing. Please tell all our ATWA students to go ahead and register for their examination. Also, the 23rd Fellowship Conferment is about to happen on Saturday, April 27, 2024 at Landmark Event Center. For all qualified members who are moving to the senior ladder of the Institute, go ahead and apply. Of course, the fee is 175,000 naira only. Let us celebrate with you as you move to become a senior member of the Institute. And that is all about the announcement. My distinguished professional members, you agree with me that today's program is worthwhile, very educating, and instructive. I want to thank you for being part of this show today. It's been wonderful. Till I come your way again with another guest and another topical issue, I want to tell you to stay safe and sound. On behalf of the editorial team and the producers, I remain Tosin Akinwumi, FCA, saying thank you for watching and bye for now.